First days were the worst. New school, new faces, same old anxieties churning in my gut. My name is Robert. Books were my refuge. Stories my shield against a world that felt perpetually off-kilter. The town was desolate, forgotten. Buildings stood shrouded in shadows, their paint peeling like scabs. This was our new home, a place that mirrored the hollowness within me. The basement door creaked open, protesting the intrusion. Dust swirled in the musty air, illuminated by the thin beam of my flashlight. My flashlight beam fell upon a small table tucked away in a corner. The doll's glassy blue eyes seemed to follow me, reflecting the emptiness I felt inside. A chill snaked down my spine, yet I couldn't tear my gaze away. The books seemed to hum with a faint energy, their pages whispering promises of forbidden knowledge. One book, its cover bound in what looked like human skin, drew my attention. Its title, etched in faded gold leaf, sent a shiver down my spine. The Resurrectionist's Guide. Could this forbidden knowledge offer a way to see my father again? I would perform the ritual. The doll, with its vacant eyes and unsettling aura, would serve as the vessel, hope, a fragile flame, rekindled within me. The book became my obsession. Every spare moment was spent deciphering its cryptic verses, memorizing its rituals, and gathering the necessary ingredients. The raven, a creature of both darkness and wisdom, would be my guide. The town was shrouded in whispers, tales of forgotten tragedies and restless spirits. One place, more than any other, drew my attention: the old Mabel's doll factory. The air grew heavy with a strange energy as I approached the factory. The factory floor was littered with debris, broken dolls, shards of porcelain, and twisted pieces of metal. In the center of the main assembly room, I found it, a large, open space, illuminated by a single beam of moonlight. The raven's feather, the symbol of the gatekeeper, lay at the center. The next day at school, I could barely focus. As I left school that afternoon, they cornered me in the deserted hallway. When I returned to the factory that evening, my blood ran cold. Fury coursed through me, hot and consuming. The air crackled with a new kind of energy, a palpable tension that sent shivers down my spine. Tom and Jack hadn't just desecrated a ritual, they had upset a delicate balance. Night fell, cloaking the factory in an oppressive darkness. I stood within the circle of the pentagram, the objects arranged before me. I closed my eyes, willing myself to feel his presence, to hear his voice. Then a voice, faint and distant as if from the bottom of a well, echoed in my mind. The mannequins began to move, their painted eyes now burning with an eerie, malevolent light. The ritual had ripped open a tear in the fabric of reality, unleashing something dark and terrible into the world. The mannequins advanced, their movements jerky and unnatural, their limbs contorting at impossible angles. Their faces, frozen in expressions of eternal torment, seemed to mock my fear, their painted smiles a grotesque parody of human emotion. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively reaching for the silver mirror. As I raised it, catching the moonlight in its reflective surface, a surge of power coursed through me, a raw, chaotic energy that both terrified and exhilarated me. "Get back!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the cavernous space. "I banish you to the shadows from whence you came." The mirror pulsed with a blinding light, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the factory walls. The mannequins hesitated, their movements faltering as if repelled by an unseen force. The air crackled with energy, the smell of ozone growing stronger. I could feel the power flowing through me, a dangerous current that threatened to consume me. The mannequins, momentarily repelled, seemed to writhe in agony, their porcelain faces contorting into expressions of pure rage. They were not easily deterred, their hunger for release palpable in the air. One by one they lurched forward, their stiff limbs becoming disturbingly fluid, their movements a grotesque parody of life. The floorboards groaned under their combined weight, the air thick with the sound of cracking porcelain and the metallic screech of rusted joints. I felt a surge of panic rising in my chest, the weight of my mistake crushing me. I had opened a door I couldn't close, unleashed a force I couldn't control. The silver mirror, still clutched in my trembling hand, offered a glimmer of hope. The moonlight reflected off its surface, casting an eerie glow across the factory floor. I focused all my will, channeling the raw energy that coursed through me, and thrust the mirror towards the advancing horde. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the mirror, illuminating the darkness with an intensity that seared my eyes. I shielded my face, momentarily blinded, and when I dared to look again, the mannequins were frozen in place, caught in a tableau of grotesque motion. The air crackled with residual energy, the smell of ozone stinging my nostrils. The momentary respite, however, did little to ease the dread that coiled in my gut. The mannequins, though momentarily stunned, were not defeated. Their eyes, burning with an infernal light, followed my every move. The silence in the aftermath of the blinding flash was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breaths. I knew this was no victory, merely a reprieve. I had to escape, to find a way to undo what I had wrought, but the exit seemed miles away, guarded by an army of the damned. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I clung to a sliver of hope. There had to be a way out, a way to break the connection I had so foolishly forged. The book, its worn pages filled with forbidden knowledge, felt heavy in my pocket. Perhaps the answer lay within its cryptic verses. I scanned the room, my gaze darting from one inanimate face to another, searching for an escape route. The factory, once a place of childhood nightmares, had become a terrifying reality, a prison of my own making. The sound of splintering wood and a guttural roar echoed from the far end of the factory floor, snapping me out of my panicked reverie. The mannequins, stirred by the noise, began to twitch and groan, their porcelain faces contorting in silent screams. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic countdown to chaos. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a beacon of unlikely hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Billy, the homeless man I had often seen scavenging for scraps near the old train tracks. burst into the room, his wild eyes wide with a strange mixture of fear and determination. He moved with surprising agility, wielding a rusty spade like a weapon forged in the fires of hell. With a roar that seemed to shake the very foundation of the factory, he charged into the heart of the approaching horde, his spade connecting with porcelain flesh and splintering wood. The sight of Billy, a man seemingly as lost and broken as the factory itself, fighting with such ferocity against the creatures I had unleashed, ignited a flicker of courage within me. I couldn't just stand here paralyzed by fear. I had to do something, anything to help. "Billy!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear and adrenaline. "The mirror! Use the mirror!" My words pierced through the cacophony of cracking porcelain and guttural growls, reaching his ears. He glanced at me, a flicker of understanding in his wild eyes. I hurled the silver mirror towards him, my heart leaping into my throat as it arced through the air. Billy, with reflexes honed on the streets, snatched it out of the air without breaking stride. He brandished it like a shield, catching the moonlight on its surface and redirecting it towards the advancing horde. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The reflected moonlight, amplified by the mirror's tarnished surface, hit the mannequins with the force of a shockwave. They reeled back, their porcelain bodies cracking and splintering under the onslaught of pure energy. A wave of heat, like the blast furnace of a raging inferno, washed over me, singeing my eyebrows and forcing me to shield my face. The air crackled and popped, thick with the smell of burning wood and ozone. The factory itself seemed to groan in protest, its ancient timbers creaking under the strain of the unleashed power. The blinding light faded, leaving behind the acrid smell of smoke and the echo of shattering porcelain. I lowered my hand, blinking away the after-images that danced before my eyes. The factory floor was littered with the remnants of my nightmare, shattered limbs, cracked faces, and piles of smouldering sawdust. Billy, his chest heaving with exertion, stood amidst the wreckage, the silver mirror still clutched in his hand. He was singed and bruised, his clothes torn, but his eyes burned with a fierce light, the light of a survivor. He had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the remnants of our shared ordeal, united by a bond forged in fire and fear. The silence, broken only by the crackling of the flames, was more profound than any words we could have spoken. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." My words trailed off, inadequate to express the depth of my gratitude. Billy, the unlikely hero, the outcast who had saved me from myself, simply nodded, a rare smile spreading across his weathered face. In that moment, amidst the ashes of my nightmare, a flicker of hope ignited within me, a testament to the enduring power of human connection, even in the darkest of times. The air hung heavy with the ghosts of smoke and ash. We stumbled out of the factory, blinking in the stark light of dawn. The world seemed strangely quiet, as if holding its breath. Billy glanced back at the skeletal silhouette of the factory. "Place is cursed," he muttered, his voice raspy. "Some doors ain't meant to be opened." The factory, now a charred monument to my folly, held a power I had been foolish to tamper with. We walked in silence, each lost in our thoughts. The weight of my actions pressed down on me. As we approached the outskirts of town, the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. The world around us now seemed tinged with an unsettling beauty. The following days were a blur of hushed whispers and anxious glances. News of the fire at the old doll factory spread through the town like wildfire. Others spoke of darker forces at play, of ancient curses and restless spirits. No one, however, suspected the truth. I, grieving, lonely boy, had inadvertently awakened the shadows. Tom and Jack, their faces pale and drawn, steered clear of me. They didn't speak of that night, and neither did I. The memory of their terror was a burden I carried alone. To my surprise, the whispers at school weren't all accusing. Some viewed me with a newfound curiosity, a grudging respect. The boy who had once been invisible was now the center of attention. Even Mrs. Peterson treated me with a gentle curiosity. She knew there was more to the story, but wisely refrained from pushing me. Billy, true to his word, disappeared from our usual haunts. I caught fleeting glimpses of him on the outskirts of town. He always seemed to vanish before I could approach him. One chilly afternoon, as I wandered through the cemetery, I found him. He was tending to a grave, his weathered hands brushing away the fallen leaves. He turned, a sad smile gracing his lips. And so, I stood beside him, the silence between us filled with unspoken words. The encounter in the cemetery, brief and unspoken as it was, brought a sense of closure, a quiet understanding that transcended words. We never spoke of the events at the factory, but the shared experience, the knowledge that we had faced the darkness together and emerged, however scarred, on the other side, forged a bond between us, a bond of empathy and shared humanity. The whispers at school eventually faded, replaced by the mundane rhythms of teenage life. The weight of my father's death, the grief that had threatened to consume me, didn't disappear, but it no longer held me captive. The experience at the factory, for all its horror, had, in a strange way, set me free. I had stared into the abyss, confronted the depths of my own despair, and emerged blinking into the light of a new day. Life, I realized, was a delicate balance, a tapestry woven from light and shadow, joy and sorrow, hope and despair. I had sought to manipulate the threads, to control the pattern, but I had learned through pain and sacrifice that some things are best left undisturbed. The past, however painful, could not be rewritten, but it could be honored. Its lessons carried within me like talismans, guiding me towards a future where the shadows no longer held such sway. I still found solace in books, in the fantastical realms where anything seemed possible, but the stories now held a different meaning, a deeper resonance. They were no longer just an escape from reality, but a way to explore the complexities of the human experience, to grapple with the big questions of life and death, love and loss, and the enduring power of the human spirit to find hope, even in the darkest of times.